Today's featured speaker, John McElroy, is an influential leader in the automotive industry. He's a journalist, lecturer, commentator, and entrepreneur. John also hosts the television program Autoline This Week, an Emmy Award-winning program featuring top automotive executives and journalists. He also co-hosts the online production of Autoline After Hours, and it can be heard daily on WWJ News Radio 950. He also writes a blog for autoblog.com and a monthly op-ed article for Ward's Auto World. Without a doubt, John McElroy brings an extensive background to covering the auto industry, beginning when he took his first plant tour when he was just 6 years old. His knowledge grew as he got older, reading any book about cars he could get his hands on. He successfully, though briefly, he admits, ventured into amateur road racing. He also worked his way through college as an hourly UAW employee in various automotive manufacturing plants. His past experience includes 5 years as Detroit editor for Road and Track and as the American correspondent for World Cars, published by the Automotive Club of Italy. I had to make sure that was in there with a name like Cipaneri. He was also invited to write the annual automotive entry for the Encyclopedia Britannica yearbook. He spent most of his career at the Automotive Industries magazine, where he ultimately rose to editorial director. John has appeared as an automotive expert on ABC World News Tonight, CBS News, and NBC Nightly News, and often interviewed by CNN, NPR, and CBC in Canada. He is frequently asked to speak to automakers, suppliers, and industry organization, and now ultimately the NCRO. He is a member of the jury choosing the North American Car and Truck of the Year, and he has won numerous awards. John is the president of Blue Sky Productions, Inc., producing television, radio, and video productions. John has 3 grown children and lives with his wife, Marie, in Farmington Hills. Please welcome today's main speaker, John McElroy.
Thank you for that, Mike. Good morning, everybody. Boy, Jay, I love your presentation. I'm so impressed with the NCRO and what you guys are doing. Good on you guys. I'll get into my remarks in a minute, but Mike actually asked me, could I say anything about Roy Schoberg, who you all know we just recently lost. And a couple of stories come to mind. Number one, the Viper program. Oh my gosh, unbelievable. And 2 stories related to that. I remember Roy telling me that, what was the budget? It was like $50 million. I mean, you guys know, in the auto industry, you can't do anything for $50 million. Not even back when they were starting on the Viper, but they did it. And one reason, Roy said, is we were really frugal. We were really creative at trying to figure out how we could get parts and components as cheap as possible. And he said, look at the HVAC on the center console here. He said, one of my guys found out that Ford's Saline Plastics molding plant had tooled up an HVAC system. I think it was for the Ford Ranger back then. And then it was a Taurus. Okay, I'm telling you guys stories you already know. But yeah, they found out that Ford had scrapped that program. The tooling was just sitting there in the plant being unused, and they got it for, I don't know, Mike, you got it for nothing, right? Pennies on the dollar. Another story he told me is that they needed side marker lamps. And one of the engineers was driving home one day and decided he needed to do an oil change on his cars, and stopped at the auto parts store, loaded up the cart with oil, and is pushing it to the register, and he sees there's these cheap little side marker lamps there for like $1.50 or something like that. Tracks down the distributor, and that went on the Viper. And I love that idea. And I think there might even be a lesson in that today. You don't have to spend like crazy. You know, when Chrysler bought American Motors, it was astonished at how cheaply AMC was able to get things done. And it wasn't that they were just being cheap, they were being frugal, they were being smart. I don't know how many of you have heard about this new EV startup in Troy, Michigan called Slate. And they're coming out with a very low cost electric truck. Former Chrysler executive Chris Barman is the CEO of the company. And I think I'll have to ask her at some point. I think she's taken some of those Viper lessons, because they are doing things very frugally. She told me that, they moved into a building that was vacated by a supplier. They didn't, they've got a couple of billionaires supporting. Jeff Bezos has put $100 million into the effort. But when they needed new office furniture, she said, we noticed down the street, some company was cleaning out all their office furniture. There's all these desks and chairs, and we ran out and got them and brought them into our building. So who knows? I think the spirit of the Viper program still lives on. Let me get to what I came here to talk about today. And it's, I'm on a mission. I am absolutely on a mission from God, like they always used to say with the Blues Brothers. Do we really want an American auto industry or not? I think we do. I want to see it happen, but I don't think that this country is doing what's needed to get there. Everyone says, yes, absolutely, we need an American auto industry. But the United States of America is actually holding its industry back. Not on purpose, it's just the way that things have developed over time. We need to think our way to victory. This is an unprecedented time in the industry. We are going through massive change, and I'm going to go through the things on the list here. We've hit what I'm calling peak auto. Now I'm starting to hear other people say the same thing. There's too much capacity in this industry. There's also so much CapEx, capital expenditures, duplication. I'm sure y'all remember Sergio Marchionne's Confessions of a Capital Junkie. Boy, he was so right 10 years ago. He's still right today. There's also R&D duplication. I'll get into that as well. Technological upheaval. The cars themselves are changing in ways that we never even imagined possible. It's hard to do. And then, of course, there's China. A month ago, I was at the Chinese auto show. I hate to tell you this, China is absolutely the leader in automotive. It's not Germany, it's not the United States, it's not Japan, it's not South Korea. In terms of innovation, in terms of creativity, in terms of the product that they're turning out, it's a monster, man. I'm telling you, we got a battle on our hands with China. And I mean, in the marketplace, we've got in this country, and this is one of the things where the United States is holding back the industry, a hostile regulatory environment, a mishmash of regulations that are Byzantine, so difficult to get through. Talent shortage. That's another thing where this country is falling down. Tariffs, I'll get into them. And then where are the leaders? We need change. We need a strategy. So let me get into it. Peak auto. I know this is a bit of an eye chart, but what I've got here is a list of sales from 2014 to 2023 of Japan, the United States, the European Union, and then the world in general. You don't have to read all these numbers, but what you need to look at, if you can see it, is the top number of sales in 2014 and the bottom number in 2023. And what you will see in every single region of the world is that a decade ago, we sold more cars, trucks, vans, and SUVs than we do today. And it's somewhere around 2017 that things started to change, but all around the world, fewer people are buying cars than they did a decade ago. What the heck is going on here? Let's look at the United States. This is a chart I put together from 1951 to 2023. And it shows around 2017 is where we hit the peak. That was peak auto. We have not seen sales go up since then. If you can see this orange line, it is the percentage of Americans who go out and buy a new car every year. And you can see over the years, it was up and down through the 50s and 60s and 70s. And now if you look in the right-hand side of it, you've seen that it's plateaued and actually started to drop down. Here's something to keep in mind. In 2017, we sold around 17 million vehicles. It hasn't gone up. From the year 2000 to the year 2023, the American population grew by 50 million people. 50 million. And car sales have not gone up. Fewer people, fewer Americans in this example, are buying new cars. I think there's a whole bunch of things going on here. Number one, though, is Price. We've hit peak pricing. You talk to anybody and they're like, oh my gosh, these cars are so expensive. The industry has literally pushed millions of American households out of the new car market. Now, one of the reasons too that they're able to do it is, man, cars are very well built these days. And so people can hold on to their used cars longer. We also have an aging population, and older people keep their cars longer, don't drive them as much. And so we've got an issue with that. Also, a younger generation, by and large, not entirely true, but a younger generation is just not as interested in cars as we all were. I've met plenty of people, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, who do not have a driver's license. They're just not that interested. Then you've got Uber and Lyft and other things that are going on, but I don't think there's any one reason we've hit peak auto, but we sure have hit it. And as I pointed out, this is a global issue, not just in the United States. And so here's where we get into the burden on the industry: overcapacity. Not just in the US, by the way, there's overcapacity everywhere in the world, but we have too many car companies with too many brands making too many cars in too many factories. Something's gonna give. Now, we've been saying this for a number of years, but I'm telling you, something's gonna give. Also, what we see is a lot of duplication of R&D and capital expenditures. 2 weeks ago, Ford Motor Company came out with a big announcement. Hey, we've developed this new battery chemistry for electric vehicles that they call LMR, lithium manganese rich. 1 week later, General Motors came out and said, hey, look at us. We've just developed a new battery chemistry called LMR, lithium manganese rich. And I'm thinking, man, if only you guys had talked together, you wouldn't have both had to go out and do the exact same thing. And so we're seeing this in so many areas. There is an opportunity for especially the Detroit automakers to get together and say, look, we're duplicating so much that is so similar, that's componentry under the skin that the customer doesn't care about and in fact doesn't even know exists. Why don't we start collaborating on this? We could save the billions of dollars every single year and drop that money to the bottom line. Technological upheaval. This is going to go through a number of things here. So when I got into the industry and you guys all got into the industry, how did you start the development of a car? Well, it started in the design studio, and the designers on a big wall would put up, you know, the seats, and they'd have those adjustable human kind of things, and they'd get out their tape and they'd do tape drawings, and they'd get all the dimensions right and figure out how they're going to start packaging things. And then they'd start building bucks of it, you know, and start everybody bringing their buck and start assembling it together. That's not how you do it today. Tesla was the first one to do this, by the way, and Tesla learned it all from the cell phone industry. And what they did was Tesla figured out how they were going to activate and actuate and control every single function in a vehicle through software. And then they got their software teams together and figured out the entire design of the software system, all the software from a total system standpoint. It's not like today where, you know, Bosch brings in their ABS controller and it's written all the software inside it. And Forvia's done the HVAC system and they've written all the software in it. And the list goes on. And every supplier brings in every single one of their components, and each and every one of those suppliers has written their own software. And guess what? The automaker doesn't have access to that software. It has to go back to the supplier company to say, hey, we'd like to make these changes, and then they work on that. Tesla was like, we're not going to do it that way. We, the car company, are going to control every single function in the car, and we're going to do it with software, and we're going to do our own things. And that enables us to do a whole lot of things. We can add features to a car that were never there when it rolled off the assembly line, because we can multi-purpose componentry that's in there and come up with entirely new things. Couple of examples. Tesla gave their car to Consumer Reports to do a braking test. Consumer Reports found out, man, the braking distance on this car is just not competitive. It takes too long. They contacted Tesla and said, you know, and I can't remember how many feet longer it took for a Tesla to come to a stop than the other cars they were testing. And Tesla said, oh, check it again in the morning and tell us what you think. And they did an over-the-air update, and bingo, all of a sudden, this thing brakes just as well as any other vehicle out there. Strictly through software. One of the engineers at Tesla found out that they could figure out a way to make the sound system better. Over-the-air update. One of the ones that is very well known is what they call dog mode. So, you know, if you leave your dog in the car, you're going to hear it from other people. You know, they're going to scream and yell at you, how dare you leave your dog in the car. So they created dog mode, where on the center screen, big icon of a dog comes up, and in big bold letters, it says dog mode, and it has the temperature displayed that you set, typically 72 degrees or something like that. So anybody walking by sees, oh, the car's in dog mode. The dog is happy. It's not going to melt in the sun or freeze in the winter. And again, this was never conceived of when the car came off the line. And the biggest thing, of course, is when there's a recall. Now, if it's a mechanical breakage, of course not. You got to take it to a service center and replace parts. But Tesla has saved so much money by being able to do over-the-air updates to avoid warranty work and recalls. And so every automaker in the world is now trying to do a software-defined vehicle. But it's really hard to do. Really hard to do. Volkswagen famously created an entirely new software company called Cariad, and they invested 10 billion euros into getting this thing off the ground. It failed miserably. They restructured the whole thing. They brought in new management. They failed miserably. So what's Volkswagen doing right now? They're running to Rivian down in Illinois and paying Rivian $5 billion to be able to use their system. GM Ford, Stellantis, Mercedes, Toyota, everybody's working on this stuff. And it's really hard to do. In fact, Ford, you probably have just heard, decided for its ICE vehicles, it's not going to go with software defined. They've just decided, no, forget it. We'll throw that to our Skunk Works operation. Ford formed a Skunk Works in California to address these very kind of things. Move fast, break things, reiterate, get going at Silicon Valley speed. General Motors just hired a guy named Sterling Anderson who worked at Tesla and was just more recently at Aurora, which is an autonomous heavy trucking company. But again, he's out in California doing this sort of thing. The point I'm getting at is that this stuff is really hard to do, and that's not even the half of it. We're going to, and this is again a Tesla initiation thing, of going from what they call domain computing to centralized zonal. And here's the difference. You know, I talked about all the different components coming from suppliers with their own software on it. It's got the chips that the suppliers bought. And every single component in your car that you drove here today has got a microprocessor in it. The seats do. The tires do. Your tire pressure monitoring system, that's got a micro in it. You name it. Every part of the car has a microprocessor on it. When the chip shortage hit, you probably noticed Tesla was affected, but not much. Why? Because it had gone to this centralized zonal computing system. Centralized mean instead of having microprocessors throughout the car, just get a couple of big ones. Why a couple? Redundancy. You got to have a backup. Are they expensive? You bet they're expensive. But man, can you get rid of a lot of other things. Zonal means you can't do all the computing in just one area. So they break the car into zones. Left front, left rear, right front, right rear. It varies by company. There's some different zones, but it's centralized zonal. Rivian just announced today its new centralized zonal system for its R2 SUV that's coming out next year, $45,000. They took out 2.5 miles of wiring. 2.5 miles, saved them 44 pounds. They got rid of 60% of the electric connectors. And I'm blanking right now of how many microprocessors they got rid of. So even though you're spending a whole lot more money on the centralized micros, the total system savings more than makes up the difference. And then combined with software defined, now you can do over-the-air updates on virtually every part of the car. And then there's one more thing that the industry is dealing with, and it's what they call digital twins. And maybe you guys know all this stuff, but for those who maybe have not heard of it, a digital twin is an exact replica of the car, but just in digital form on a computer. And they got this idea actually from the cell phone industry, because cell phones, you know, they've got all kinds of apps on them, all kinds of apps. And I've seen these digital twins in action, not with the cell phones, but what the cell phone companies did is create a digital twin of the phone that existed, not physically, but on a computer, with all the apps, with all their icons. And if you went to the computer, if it was a touch screen or with a mouse, you could click on that app and it would absolutely work perfectly, as if it were a physical phone. In fact, digital twins are so good that you can take the output of the digital twin into your cell phone or your components on your car or the car itself and run the vehicle or the phone off the digital twin. Or vice versa, you can take the physical and plug it into the digital twin and have it work. What's the advantage of this? Oh my gosh, if you've got a digital twin, now you can try all kinds of engineering variations, iterations, make any kind of changes, go fast, fast, fast. It's a great tool. The industry is going with it, but they're struggling. All of this stuff is really hard to do. And it doesn't fit the culture and the skill set that legacy areas like the Detroit area happen to have. That skill set, that knowledge, that culture rests in the tech hubs, notably Silicon Valley. So it's a challenge for us. And then let's move on to contradictory environmental issues. You know, we've got the EPA that was created around 1970, and we've got the Department of Transportation that I think came around in 1968, and we've got NHTSA that again was created around 1970 by Congress. And Congress said, you know, we got to make the air cleaner, we've got to make cars safer, and then later in the late 70s, Congress mandated fuel economy regulations. So the industry, and a lot of you played a big role in this, did a remarkable job, an amazing job in reducing criteria emissions, HCCO, NOx. In fact, the industry has eliminated over 99% of those emissions. It's amazing. You know, one of the stories I like to tell, I mean, it's a little bit maudlin, but if somebody were to park their car in their garage, close the door and all the windows, turn on the engine and wait, you're not gonna die. You might get a headache, but you're not gonna die. And so that just shows you how clean tailpipe emissions have become. In fact, they've become so clean that the EPA decided, you know what? We got to put our focus on CO2. Now, you all know the only way that we know as a human race on how to reduce CO2 is to reduce the amount of fuel that you burn. There isn't some special catalytic converter or some special fuel injection system that will magically reduce CO2. You have to reduce the amount of fuel you burn. Well, guess what? Reducing the amount of fuel you burn that's a fuel economy standard. But the EPA has the CO2 thing going on, and NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, they're the ones who run fuel economy. And so they both have big sets of rules that are so complicated and so Byzantine. And then, of course, you got the California Air Resources Board in the background doing its own thing, too. But why do we have two sets of different regulations that are trying to accomplish almost exactly the same thing? If it was exactly the same thing, maybe it wouldn't be bad. You could hand the EPA all your, your regulatory work, and you could hand NHTSA all your but they're different. They have different test procedures, different schedules, different this, different that. We need to change all that. And then meanwhile, too, NHTSA handles all of the safety regulations, and all the while that EPA is forcing you to reduce your emissions, and NHTSA on one hand is trying to get you to improve your fuel economy. NHTSA is also mandating all the safety equipment and structure that does what? Makes you burn more fuel and put out more emissions. None of this is coordinated. No one's at the agencies are sitting down and say, hey, we got to have a plan here. What I'm saying is, number one, I don't care which it is, let's get rid of the fuel economy regulations, or let's get rid of the CO2 regulations. Let's just get rid of it. I mean, we'll keep one or the other because, look, we want cleaner cars. We want safer cars. But what I'm thinking that we need right now in the United States, and this has got to be done by Congress, you can't blame these agencies. Congress created these agencies and gave them mandates. Now, maybe you can blame the agencies for taking that mandate a little too far, but the solution is in Congress. And what I would love to see us come out with is an Office of Automotive Regulation that handles all of these things and makes it far simpler, far more efficient, far more predictable for the industry without giving up anything in terms of safety or emissions. We don't want to backtrack on this stuff. I believe we can get just as clean an air and just as safe a car with a lot less regulation and a lot more efficiently. And then we get to the talent shortage. The president, and God bless him for wanting it, wants to bring back a whole lot of more manufacturing to the United States. Who's going to work in the factories? Who's going to do all this work? I can tell you, I know two companies in the Detroit area right now that are bringing Mexican nationals, both hourly and engineering, to run their operations because they can't get Americans that are either willing or able to do the work. I've got pictures here of grade school kids and middle school kids and maybe college kids, and there's a lot of great STEM education efforts in this country. The Society of Automotive Engineers has this fantastic program called World in Motion, from grade school all the way to college. Terrific stuff. I look into it, but it's not enough. It is absolutely not enough. The biggest thing I hear, the biggest problem I hear about, I visit with a lot of suppliers, I visit with a lot of automakers. We can't get the talent we need. So when we have this big push to bring manufacturing back to the United States, who's going to do these jobs? And for you all on the retail side, you know it. Where do you get your techs? There's an absolute shortage of auto techs in this country. Who's addressing this? I mean, we don't hear it coming out of Washington for sure. We need educational reform. We need to bring shop class back into high schools. It's happening a lot in FIRST Robotics. If you're familiar with that, has been a great program. It's not enough. We need to do more. And then here come the Chinese. Oh my gosh. Like I said, I was in Shanghai a month ago at the Shanghai Auto Show. I was talking to the table here, and here's how I would describe the Shanghai Auto Show. Imagine putting the LA Auto Show in combination with the Chicago Auto Show, in combination with the Detroit Auto Show, in combination with the New York Show. Now double that. Now double it again. That's the Shanghai Auto Show. It's a monster. It's unbelievable. The amount of product that's coming out of China is staggering. The innovation that's going on there is bleeding edge. Now, having said that, Chinese industry is headed for trouble. Of all the Chinese EV startups, only 2 are making money. Everybody else loses money. I talked about overcapacity in the world. We've got overcapacity in the United States. It's nothing like the overcapacity that's in China. Now, the Chinese government is aware of this, and they're trying to do something about it. But here's the problem. You've got two different kinds of car companies in China. One that they call the state-owned enterprises. They're government-owned. They're owned by provinces or big cities like Shanghai and Beijing and Guangzhou and the like. And then you've got the independent startups like BYD and NIO and Xpeng and others. The state-owned enterprises exist for one reason only, not to make cars. That's a side product. They're there to create jobs. And so when the Chinese government starts maneuvering to say, we've got too many companies and too much capacity, we got to get it down because we, the Chinese government, can't subsidize this forever. They do a lot of subsidies, by the way. And so they're going to have to rationalize their industry. And that's when it's going to hit the fan, because they're going to try to put two state-owned enterprises together, and one's going to say, great, no problem. You guys are going to shut your factories and we'll move all the work to ours. And the other companies are going to say, you're going to close your factories and we're going to move it. And that's where I think it's all going to break down. But here's the big thing. Oh, you know, and I mentioned peak auto. People are stunned when I say this. China has also hit peak auto. You know, we keep hearing about, oh my gosh, BYD is growing so fast, and, you know, NIO and Xiaomi and Huawei and all these. Yeah, they are growing fast. And we keep seeing how much exports are happening and the total volume in China. But if you look at the Chinese home market, do not count exports. And you look at passenger vehicles, do not count commercial vehicles. It's bouncing around 21, 22 million a year. China has absolutely hit peak auto. And I think we're going to see the impact of it there, maybe faster than anywhere else, because the Chinese population is in decline. This year alone, the Chinese population will shrink by 3 million people. And it's only going to accelerate as it goes out. But like I said, they're a monster. They are now the #1 exporter of vehicles in the world. They surpassed Japan 2 years ago. They're doing somewhere between 5 and 6 million vehicles of export, and they are taking over other markets. And it's coming out of the market share of the existing players, which means their volume is going down, which means their costs are going up. And then the tariffs will play a role. The tariffs are an important part of the strategy that I'm talking about here that this country needs. But the tariffs in and of themselves don't solve anything. They buy time, but we got to do something with that time. And so what we need from the US government is a comprehensive automotive industry strategy. A strategy, and I would argue that it should be as market-based as possible, not subsidy-based. So some examples, and I'm hoping that some of this stuff comes in the new tax plan that they're talking about. 1 year depreciation write-offs. You want to get new equipment, especially now as we're bringing more manufacturing back to the United States, write that tooling off in 1 year. More generous R&D write-offs. You know, there's R and there's D. D, as you all know, D is the development. That's all the new product development. What if we could have much better tax write-offs for that too? Throw it into the mix. Just create a field where the industry here in the US can compete a whole lot better. Like I said, the Office of Automotive Regulation, education reform, and tariffs that support North American operations. Because I don't know why we're trashing Canada, and I think we absolutely need the low cost that Mexico supplies to this industry so that the North American industry is competitive. Remember, when you put Canada and Mexico into the mix, we're talking 20 million, maybe 21 million in a good year. What did I just say China's home market is at? 21 to 22 million. We can absolutely have the North American industry competitive with the Chinese. And so what we need to do is eliminate duplicative CapEx and R&D, Use more off-the-shelf parts. They're designed, they're validated. Just use them. No need to go out and reinvent the wheel every time. I'm thinking we should pre-source suppliers, eliminate the bidding. I mean, the automakers know what the cost has got to be. Go find suppliers who are willing to work on that and bring them in early to a program so you get their ideas on how to reduce costs. This is what Ford, by the way, is doing with its Skunk Works operation in California, pre-sourcing the suppliers and bringing them in early. Because, you know, once a vehicle is designed and you go to the supplier and say, you need to reduce your costs, boy, it's so much better if they can be in part of the design process and give you all their ideas on how to get costs down. I think we have to rethink all specs and procedures. Give you a couple of good examples. There's a teardown company and benchmarking called Caresoft in Livonia. And they were taking me through these electric cars from legacy automakers. And they showed me the trunk area and showed all the sealing that takes place in where all the panels meet up. And they said, you know why that sealing is there? I said, to keep the emissions from coming into the car, right? I said, that's right. How many emissions are coming out of the tailpipe of an electric car? 0. Why do we have that sealing there? Because it's in the specs. Another good example, the cross-beam instrument panel bar. Boy, these things are built like, you know, the Rock of Gibraltar. Why? Because when the industry went to front-wheel drive, transverse engine, you've got different shaking motions going on, and you could feel that in the steering wheel. So we damped that down with these really impressive cross-beam bars. Don't need that in an electric car, but we're still building them to the spec because that's what the spec calls for. We got to rethink all of these specs that have built up over the last century. And then for dealers, you know, we make the techs buy their own tools. And that's, I think, a big blockage for people who want to get into the business. That's a big outlay for somebody like that. So anyway, I think, oh yeah, one more thing. Imagine if the auto industry spoke with one voice on this. Imagine if the Alliance for Automotive Innovation, which is the lobbying group for all the automakers, NADA for all the dealers, MEMA for all the suppliers, and labor, you got to throw labor into this. What if they spoke with one voice saying, this, if we want an American auto industry, this is what we need. And if they spoke with one voice, I think it would be extremely powerful. And so just to recap, we're going through peak auto. We've got too much duplication of money, technological upheaval, the likes of which the industry has never seen. We got China, we got regulation, we got tariffs, we got a talent shortage. Now we need the leadership to take this message out to save this industry. And with that, I conclude my remarks, and let's get to the best part, which is the Q&A.
All right.
Great presentation. We're all familiar with Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency. Why don't you volunteer to head up Department of Automotive Efficiency? Take your ideas, get some congressional background, get some support, do what you propose, get the goddamn job done, and you're the man to do it.
Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. But this is you're the first group that I've taken this message to. But I'm going to be speaking up in Mackinac at the policy conference next week. I'm flying to Atlanta a couple of weeks after that to talk to a group there about it. I told you, I'm on a mission. But thank you for the comment. And we don't have to talk about, if you guys want to talk Stellantis and other things, you know, it doesn't have to be, oh, Chris. Oh. Yeah.
Chinese supplier consortium, I think government funded, where it does exactly the kind of things you're talking about. They offer up a whole array of component parts for all the different auto manufacturers.
Yeah, no, I love that idea, Chris. The Chinese have an organization that makes it a whole lot easier to be able to buy off the shelf parts. You know, some of the examples I mentioned, the tire pressure monitoring system. Every automaker has a different one. Why? We're just measuring the pressure in the tires. That should be right off the shelf. Windshield wiper regulators. Everyone's got a different one. Why? What if we combined all that together? Imagine the manufacturing scale that you could get out of it. The fuel filler neck, the opening. Everyone's got a different one. I mean, the fuel, you know, at the gas station, the pumps are all the same. You know, the nozzles are all the same. There are countless numbers of common parts that we could go to. And I would hope MEMA, you know, the Motor Equipment Manufacturers Association, which represents the suppliers, would get on the bandwagon with this. But it really starts with the OEMs. The OEMs have got to agree to saying, you know what, we don't have to redesign everything. Let's just commonize these things. This is one reason why the Chinese move as fast as they do. They're not smarter than us. They're not better than us. But, you know, if you just take a part off the shelf, imagine all the time that you saved. And time is money, and getting to the market fast is so important.
Hi, I had a question relative to emission. I had read that some of the companies that are working our gasoline engines are trying to come up with equivalent of DEF, diesel exhaust fluid. They're doing a GEF, gasoline exhaust fluid, but I haven't read much about it. I don't know if it's still playing in the game or.
Yeah, I'm not familiar enough with that to give you a good comment, but it's generally driven by regulation. Europe is far more stringent on this. So I think you're seeing more of that in Europe than you are here. Also, remember with the EV irrational exuberance that happened over the last 4 years, automakers pretty much shut down their ICE development. That's completely changing right now. Remember, they all said we'll never do a new ICE engine again. I just talked to one of the equipment manufacturers that makes engine assembly equipment. They said we're booked for years out on new programs. Well, number one, the automakers started building electric cars primarily because of regulation. Primarily. I mean, Tesla taught the world that if you build a cool electric car, people will buy them. And so there is market demand out there for them. But number one, they went into it because of regulation. Number two is the car companies don't build charging stations. And it's going to require a lot of government subsidies to get them out there. And of course, the Trump administration now wants to get rid of all those subsidies. The one thing I would keep in mind is that most EV owners are multiple car families. And so I don't know if any of you have driven an electric car. I think they're fantastic. I mean, and if any of you have ever had the chance to really do like ludicrous mode in a Tesla, look, I race cars. I've driven race cars. I've been in dragsters. I have never and this includes taking off at Metro Airport. I have never accelerated so fast in my life than I was in ludicrous mode in a Tesla. In fact, I promise you, if you did multiple fast runs, you'd get out of the car and throw up. I mean, it doesn't just push you back in the seat, it pushes the blood to the back of your head. I'm not exaggerating. It's amazing. Quieter, faster, smoother. Never go to a gas station again. There's a lot that's good about electric cars. but not if you're going on a long trip. You can do it, and Tesla's charging network, the supercharger network, is terrific, and people take their Teslas all over the place. But wherever you're going, you better add a couple of hours to the time to get to your destination, because you're going to have to stop and charge, and I'm sorry, it just takes longer than it does. But point in fact, most people with electric cars charge at home. They leave the garage every morning with a full tank, so to speak, and they love them. And this is why, even though the growth in EV sales is not coming nearly as fast as the industry had hoped it would, or everyone thought it would just a few years ago, there's a lot of people out there that want to buy an electric car. They're waiting for their brand to come out with one. They're waiting to see more of their neighbors or friends have one. They want to see more charging stations. And once that happens, and it will, but we're still several years away from that happening, EV sales will grow. I believe that the industry over time will go electric. Not for anybody has to do long distance towing or hauling. That just doesn't work. And that's why I think what we're going to see in the United States is what they call extended range EVs, where you have an onboard motor, a gasoline engine, could be diesel, but it's going to be gasoline, that comes on, and all it does is make sure that the battery stays charged. It runs a generator. And, you know, China is going crazy over, they call them EREVs, extended range EVs. In China, they call them REEVs, range extended EVs. But it takes care of everybody's worry about range anxiety or charging time or a place to charge. You don't need it. You got a gasoline engine, and you can drive in electric mode almost all the time. And so I think you're going to see, before this decade is out, especially the Detroit 3 with their full-size pickups and SUVs, start offering a lot more EREVs.
John, you mentioned everybody that came here had a microprocessor in a car. You forgot about Bill Galling's car. I don't think the 31 Imperial had a micro in it.
Isn't that true?
So other than his cell phone,
Yeah.
which he probably has,
Yeah.
he came here without a microprocessor.
Yeah, that's right. And it can't be hacked. You know, I've said, come the cybersecurity war, this place is going to look like the Dream Cruise, because all the old cars are not going to be hacked and not going to have any electronic problem.
Autonomous driving, how do you see that in the factoring of everything else that you put into play here in the future?
Look, oh yeah, the question was, what do I think about autonomous vehicles? Yeah. So I wrote my first article on autonomous vehicles in 1987. And to me, it's like, come on, let's get going here. What, you know, where are they? You know, and there was a lot of really good research and development going on with autonomous vehicles back in the 1980s. In the United States, we called it IVHS, Intelligent Vehicle and Highway Systems. In Japan, they just called it IVS, Intelligent Vehicle Systems. In Europe, I guess because they got to be different, they called it Prometheus, after one of the Greek gods. But look, autonomy is the game changer when it finally hits, and it's starting to, and I'll get into that a bit. Autonomy opens up mobility to all segments of society. You know, I remember when I told my father, Dad, you can't drive anymore. And he said, John, I don't care. You know, I've had a great life. If I kill myself, you know, whatever. I said, Dad, I'm not worried about you killing yourself. I'm worried about you killing somebody else. That hit him like a brick. And he turned over his keys very reluctantly. If he had an autonomous car, he wouldn't have to give up his own mobility. And people say, well, you can get a taxi, you can get an Uber. I like having my car, and I'm sure most of you do too. And so if you're elderly, you don't have to give up your mobility. If you're very young, you can take your car keys and give them to little kids and say, hey, go visit your friends, take the car. If you're blind or disabled, you've been at the bar and you had a few too many, no problem. Autonomy opens up mobility to all segments of society. To me, mobility is freedom. In fact, that used to be the SAE's motto, freedom through mobility. And so autonomy is coming. We don't see it here in Detroit much. There is an autonomous shuttle van that, by the way, you can take from Corktown to the DeQuinder Cut with stops in between. They do have a driver on board because people are still a little too nervous. But any of you who have been in San Francisco or Las Vegas or Miami or Phoenix have seen autonomous vehicles running around. It's coming. It's coming fast. It's coming fast. It's coming slower than we thought it would, and now it's going to come faster than we thought was going to happen, as technology usually happens. And so it's a race now between the United States and China as to who is going to dominate this technology. Chinese are very good at this, by the way, but I would say we're still in the lead. Not by much, but we're still in the lead. And I think autonomy will have as much impact on society as when the horseless carriage first appeared at the turn of the 20th century. Oh, yeah, that's right. Chrysler had the, and in fact, Waymo is still using some Chrysler minivans, though they've gone mostly to the Jaguar F-Paces. So yeah, autonomy is going to happen. When will you be able to buy one in a showroom? Not in this decade. It'll probably be the next decade, though, because like I said, it's coming.
We have a question here, John.
Okay, sure.
My last vehicle was a hybrid, which I felt is a pretty good compromise between fully electric and gas cars. My fuel economy was fantastic. My electric bill actually went down because I switched to a cheaper electric program. And whatever you got to say about hybrids?
Yeah, hybrids are perfect. In fact, I test drive all kinds of different cars. I probably test drive 70 different vehicles a year. I drove over here in a Hyundai Sonata hybrid. I'm getting 46 miles to the gallon. And believe me, I ain't hyper miling. I'm going 80 miles an hour everywhere I go. So yeah, hybrids are perfect. It's kind of funny to me, there's a lot of people who hate electric cars, absolutely want nothing about them. And these are the same people who 20 years ago hated hybrids. And so it's kind of funny to me that the people who used to hate hybrids have now come to accept them. I think hybrids are going to go great. There's plug-in hybrids where you can drive on the battery for a while. And then there's a variation of the plug-in hybrid that I just described, the extended range EV, that I think is actually a better solution. That, yeah, if you plug in every day, you leave the garage with a full tank, and you have zero range anxiety, and you can go all across the country. So I think you're going to see hybrids explode in popularity. There's 3 companies that really are at the forefront right now. Toyota is doing an amazing job with its hybrids. Honda and Ford. I think everybody else is, and like I said, the Hyundai group is coming on strong too, but seems to me that hybrid fits what the American public wants right now.
John, right here.
I've seen some readings where the management of Stellantis is looking to remove some of the brands they have. What are your thoughts of Chrysler keeping the 4 brands that we have? The Chrysler, Dodge, Ram, and Jeep intact, as opposed to maybe getting 1 or 2 of them eliminated?
Yeah, no, great question. I don't see the need to get rid of the brand on a vehicle. Does Stellantis need a Chrysler brand? Maybe not. Does it need a Chrysler Pacifica? Yeah, I think it does. Does Stellantis need a Dodge division? Probably not. But does it need a Charger, Challenger? And yeah, it probably does. So I can see, and look, most of the Stellantis dealers are, maybe all of them, I don't know at this point, they're all multi-brand. They carry all 4. So I don't see the need to get rid of the brand, but I don't think it needs to be a standalone organization. It can be built around a given model that's doing well.
Yeah, I've got a question here. You mentioned that, as we know, that China has become the largest exporter of cars. Yet, the United States market is not buying Chinese cars, being out of this market. Your mission becomes even more critical the day that changes in order to be able to be effective competitor to China. Otherwise, we'll be in trouble. So I see that coming. I know that right now the duties, the tariffs are an interim step, but that's not going to be there forever. Any comments you may have?
Sure, great question. There's two things going on preventing Chinese cars from coming into the country. Number one is the tariffs, which are sky high and would make them not competitive. But the second thing is there's legislation going through Congress right now that started last year that would ban any vehicle, Chinese or otherwise, from using Chinese connected car technology. And these days, every single vehicle is connected to the cloud. And so for the Chinese to come here, they would have to scrap a huge chunk of the Chinese technology in their cars and use presumably American sources for that. By the way, there isn't much American sources for it. And so right now, I think they would be reluctant to give that up because it's part of their big cost advantage. And the other thing is they're taking over the world. They can get to the United States later. Right now, they are easily going into places like Latin America, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, with no, Europe even, with no problem whatsoever. And so I don't think they're going to worry too much about the US in the short term. In the long term, of course, they want to be here. The Chinese market is far bigger than the US market, but the US market is more profitable than the Chinese market, or the Japanese, or the Korean, or the European markets. This is the most profitable market for any automaker in the world. I personally think we need to have Chinese competition. In fact, if I could wave a magic wand, I'll pick a date, I'll say, starting in 2030, we're going to start decreasing the tariffs until they're completely gone by 2040. And so, dear auto industry, there's your window to get competitive. And by the way, you don't have to get to zero. By the time you get it down to around a 10% tariff, the Chinese are right there. They're totally competitive. But that's my fear about the tariffs, is once you have a protected market, you get fat, dumb, and lazy. You stop innovating. You stop taking chances. And so I think we need the Chinese competition to keep pushing us to do even better.
We have one last.
Okay.
Do you believe that vehicles and their design has gone too far, that we're proceeding from a bad engineering standpoint and trying to fix it? Is the internal combustion engine a bad design, but we've got a lot of electronics to try to make it clean and efficient? We've got electric doors and locks and windows where we could go simplify that and reduce cost. Do you think there's any way back?
Yeah, I do, but it's going to take organizational, structural change in the legacy automakers. So, for example, with a legacy automaker, you have the different silos, and you all know it. Design is a silo, engineering is a silo, manufacturing is a silo, purchasing is a silo, finance is a silo. The way Tesla designs its cars, and it's kind of like the way Chrysler used to do it with platform engineering. Everybody works on a platform. You don't work in a silo, you work on a platform. And in fact, the way Tesla does it, everybody who's working on a given car, the Model 3, the Cybertruck, the Model X, or any of them, all of them are in one room. All of them in one room. And they approach it from a total systems design standpoint. It's not each silo brings in its little piece and you put it together. And, you know, even in engineering, everything's siloed. You got powertrain, you got chassis, you got et cetera, et cetera. Everybody brings their piece and then you have to synthesize it, which takes a lot of development effort at the proving ground, right? So if you take it from a total systems standpoint, man, can you take out a lot of cost, a tremendous amount of cost. You should see the way Teslas go together. They're like Lego bricks. It's amazing because they took it from a total system standpoint. In fact, I was fortunate enough to be invited up to talk to Ford's executive suite, Jim Farley and all his direct reports. And that's what I told them, because they were asking me almost the same question that you asked. How do we do this? And I said, why don't you take a look at how Chrysler did platform engineering? It worked brilliantly well. The company was so successful, so profitable. And they said, are you trying to tell us how to run our company? I said, no, all I'm telling you is you ought to go look at an example of something that worked really, really well. And with that, I think I've got to sign off, but thank you so much. You've been terrific.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John, very much for that. Great crowd. That concludes today. So have a great summer. Thank you very much for coming, and we'll see you at the October breakfast meeting. Thank you. Bye-bye.